hi everyone, and welcome to the first of the rolling on interviews with people we've met over on our travels over the past couple of years, looking at sessions and sing-arounds. Today, as you can see from my background, you might recognise these good people. We're in Oxford, virtually, talking to James Bell here, who set up a wonderful institution called the Bastard English Session. And here's James and I in conversation about why it's called the Bastard Session, and really all sorts of other things around the scene. So I hope you enjoy it. This is the first one we've done, so you'll have to excuse the poor quality of some of the freezing. Poor old James was having a pretty bad signal, but anyway, it's thought that counts, isn't it? So over to James.
A second, I've got some video of what the sessions look like, but it's normally like 100 plus people in a cramped pub room, standing on chairs, singing kind of either Shallow Brown or like something by Prince, you know. I mean, as in like we have this thing of, well, basically we'll start off with traditional tunes, often traditional like Cotswold Morris tunes, and then it will become a bit more general, and then we'll do songs, and then when people lurking at the edge will step forward and go, "Pop a clock," and I go, no, it's not pop a clock yet. And then probably one guy, Josh, will just like jump on a chair and start singing Sex on the Beach or something. And then like, and then it's just, everyone's like, oh, okay. The tune players are like, all right, pop a clock. It's been great. See ya. And so that's kind of how that dynamic works.
What is out in your mind? Go on. I mean, so
what would we not have?
What would not make you sit there and think, yeah, that's cool. I'm glad we included that one tonight. What's
I think it is anything that is kind of deliberately intended to offend somebody.
So fascist anthems would be right out, kind of thing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I don't know. It's a fun, like there was a funny one with the with Fairy Tale of New York, which I played the Christmas session we did, and a lot of people don't like using the word faggot in it.
No, that's true.
And I've got upset by it. Now. One of the things that I feel about that is that I think it's a great song, and I think that word really fits in that song, because I feel that song is not supposed to be like a Christmas carol. It's supposed to be like a post-watershed. I mean, like he's singing to a fictional character who is a junkie who is dying of a heroin overdose, and you're not going to get like a pleasant response from these people. And if you tone that down, you don't get like the real experience. But for this session, I was aware of the fact that it's funny that it shouldn't be a Christmas carol, but it is a Christmas carol. Let's be realistic. So I was happy to change the words for that. And I'm not going to like stand outside Shane McGowan's house with a placard, but like that's one of the curious things to sort of navigate. In terms of what's out in terms of genre, like the weirder the genre, the better. I mean, also I think it's a case of if someone is boring and goes on for like 20 minutes, but we've never had that. But I mean, I think if someone is like, but in a way, that's kind of a sort of amount of disrespect. But again, if someone just comes up with something kind of insane, we've had like the Crazy Frog, we've had Axel F, we've had, I mean, like every pop tune you can think of. We have a lot. I mean, like every folk session has got mashups of kind of like singing Pinball Wizard to the tune of Nutting Girl and this sort of stuff. So I mean, that's a fairly common thing. But I like, in terms of genre, years ago where I was going there, I realized that the session I was doing was kind of getting out of hand, and there were loads of people who wanted to perform, and we needed some system for kind of organizing this. So I bought a hat. I bought this like kind of just hat from a party shop, and you grab the hat and put the hat on if you want to perform. So when I was at Rosie's shanty session, they have a parrot, and they pass around this stuffed parrot. So that's become a sort of thing from Sidmouth to, I think I don't know whether or not she got that from the Bastard Session. She probably did.
And I guess what are your thoughts on that then? So the main kind of theme is performance versus sharing. Performance is typified by everybody looks at you, you're out the front stage, blah, blah, versus whatever version of pass the hat or the parrot around the room. What's been your experience around that?
Now, the thing about the Catweasel Club is that there isn't a microphone. You perform, sort of, just in the space, that room. Now, I think that makes a huge difference. It may sound like it's sort of an odd thing, but one of the things that happens is the Catweasel Club is ridiculously supportive, and everyone shuts up. And when you perform, you know that everyone is listening. One of the criticisms I've heard people make about the Catweasel Club and the Bastard Session is that in a way it's too supportive, and you can get bad performers who get like lots of applause, and they don't like that kind of level of encouragement. Now, like to a certain extent, you know, for the people who are like the hardcore tune players, I can kind of get that. But this is a case of Catweasel is very interested in that crossover between performance and sharing. And a lot of the people who will perform at the session will then go and perform at the open mic night, and the open mic. So as I say, there is this kind of crossover, but there is still very much the same sort of the sense of you kind of get rewarded for effort rather than for technical execution.
Yeah.
And I actually feel like I wouldn't want that for every event. You know, it's not a bad thing to have some events where people are cherry picked and they have practiced a lot. In fact, actually, when I was doing the folk weekend thing, I ran an open mic night to find people to book for the local stages.
Oh, yeah.
And if someone was competent, if someone had practiced and they could deliver to an audience, I would book them. But that was a case where you don't just get points for showing up. Like there were a number of people that were just like, I'm sorry, you're not there yet. You know, happy to have you at some point, but you need to practice more. And it's really just kind of an experience thing. But yeah, so in terms of kind of performance, like I have had nothing but great experiences at the Catweasel Club, which I probably enjoy even more than the session that I run. But I think it is exceptionally well run. When I have been to other open mic nights, it's a totally different deal. One of the key things which has made such a difference, and again, it's coming back to a universal thing for me, which is actually all of the things that I really enjoy run by pretty hard rules. I had started coming to the Catweasel Club in 2006. And I, second or third time, said to Matt Sage, the guy who's running it, I've got some friends coming. Can I play in the second half? And he said, no. And then just walked off. And I'd never had that as a kind of an experience. But like he was completely brutal. And it's like, no. He is very, like he's got his particular rules and he's kind of strict with them. And what that means as a difference is that it's not his mate Jezza who's on stage. It's like, oh, can I just do two more? Like, yeah, go on, Jezza. And everyone's like, oh God, you know. And then it's just going to sort of drag on. Like, he will keep to time. This is another thing as well in terms of keeping to time. When I start the session online, I start like within 10 seconds. And when I finish at the ISIS, I'm looking at a watch and we finish at midnight. And that's another thing which I think means that people feel like they know that it's running to like they know that it's kind of organized, and that I think helps people sort of feel like it's an actual
makes them feel like they can fit in. Absolutely. No clique.
Yeah,
I mean, this thing about trying to get away from cliques, although you know it's true that most people love being in one. But really, you know, the mood from everybody we've met and we've talked to is this thing about if I go in for the first time and I feel welcome, I'll come back. If I go in for the first time and I don't feel welcome, I probably won't go back, because why should I? You know, what the hell have I got to gain? I'll go somewhere else.
But that is, I find it's difficult to not have cliques happen by accident. Like we work quite hard to try to stop the session from being a clique. But once you've got a group of people who love coming, and actually at the Catweasel Club, I can accidentally create a cliquey atmosphere, because there's one of the things about this is it's sort of like a lot of the performers know each other really well. People came to my wedding, this sort of thing, and I'll heckle them and they'll heckle me from stage and this sort of thing, and that's great fun for me. But if you turn up there and there's this like clearly everyone knows each other, but it's this kind of that can be very alienating. So it's, I mean, like no one wants to turn up and for there to be a clique, but it can be difficult for that to happen. And what I try and do at the Bastard Sessions is in the physical one, when people turn up, I'll often go up to people and I'll say, hi, have you been before? You know, I'm James, I'm running it. And they'll say, yes, I've been like 3 or 4 times and we've had this conversation each time. And I'll say, I'm sorry, I've already had 3 pints of cider. I'm like, you know, so yeah. Anyway, sorry, I cut you off then when you were just talking about cliques, but I wanted to make that point that I think it's like not having a clique is a skill, not a decision, I think.
Oh, quotable quotes of the century.
Yeah,
that's great.
Because, you know, once you get like a hardcore audience turning up. I mean, one of the other expressions that we've had in the Bastard Session is there comes a point where we need to, what the expression is, we need to break the dude wall, because you will get a wall of dudes standing at the front playing kind of in a circle. I'm like, okay, like if possible, if some women could just like step in here and whatever, it will help break the dude wall. And then once that happens, other female performers will come. And that's very much the case. Like if the dude wall remains unbroken after 9 o'clock, no women will perform. But if it's like almost kind of enforced, then it'll be like 60-40, you know, if we're lucky. Because blokes are just always, when I was booking acts, I would always find that there was sort of the really talented female performers would be like, I don't know if I'm good enough. I'm like, everyone thinks you're brilliant. But like some guy's been playing for 5 minutes and can play Purple Haze badly. He's like, I'm ready. I can do it now.
Yeah. So I suppose, yeah, I suppose questions about the future, James, really. I mean, you know, obviously when you get to my age, you can say I've been doing it forever and I will do it to the day I drop dead, probably. What about you? I mean, what's the future looking like?
I guess, I mean, long term, it's kind of more of the same, but I think it's a case of I can't, because this isn't and I don't think for anyone, it's like this sort of community music, because it doesn't have a destination, because you're so much reacting to how society is. It will go where that goes in future. I guess I can be more specific about the short term. Now, in terms of virtual rather than physical, I have embraced the sort of virtual side of things quite fully. I'm a bit of a tech head. I do enjoy this sort of stuff. The duet function on TikTok is the thing that is exciting. I think that's the thing where you can play with other people. Finally, like there hasn't been, and you don't have to do it live, but you can kind of build up these sort of chains. And that's something I definitely want to play with. Really relevant, because are you aware of the whole shanty talk phenomenon?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So like, I'm trying to bring our session onto TikTok. This has been one of the latest things. And it's now to the point where I'll say to my wife, do you want to know something interesting? And she says, if it's not about TikTok, yes. So she has had enough of it. But one of the things about TikTok is that you can do these duets. Yeah, and so we're trying to see whether or not we can do tune duets. And we've got like a couple up and running. I mean, we started basically last week. So at some point today, I'm going to nudge people and say, come on, more tunes. We need more duets, God damn it. And this is my sort of thing, to just be slightly, come on, everyone, it's going to be great. In terms of an online session, I feel like we've tinkered with it quite a bit. And my feeling is that, like, at the moment, unless something radical is introduced to it, I am concluding that it has got its one particular pro, which is that people all around the world can participate. But other than that, it is an inferior medium to being in the room. And I feel like that's actually, it's such an important thing to be in the same space as other people, but something that's specifically for people that can't be there, that makes sense. But one of the lessons I drew from online is that online needs to be, for me, less frequent and less long. I think if I was going to do this, the Basta sessions that we do are once a month. Yeah. And we did try doing it kind of sooner, more frequently, but it helps to get that big kind of energy up. I think if I was going to, and I think I probably will keep doing the kind of online sessions, but I reckon I would probably move to quarterly. I would probably move to once every 3 months. We'd still do 2 hours. Yeah. And then if we did it quarterly, I would say, what are we feeling like? Do we want to do this more regularly? Do we want to do this kind of once a month? I think that it is like it requires a certain amount of, it requires an unusual energy doing things in kind of on Zoom that I feel like when we get back to normal is going to seem a bit, you're going to perhaps be a bit less inclined to do the kind of online video. But as I say, I feel like if it was less frequent, and if it was like for 2 hours, but it is this case of you will have that experience of talking to people all over the world. And with these kind of sessions, with a lot of the open mic stuff, people will suddenly move to Glasgow, will move to New Zealand, will move to whatever. And it is really nice to be able to do a kind of catch up. So that's something that I think I'll be looking at, but it will be very reactive. The future for me is going to be seeing where we are, I think. You mentioned, should people be on social media? One of the curious things I think is that I feel like a lot of older people people in their 50s and 60s are maybe more comfortable with social media than people in their teens. That a lot of people in their teens are just like I don't fully understand data harvesting, but I understand peer pressure. And the two combined don't sound fantastic. And I remember the days of MySpace when like every teenager, I mean, I remember, because I sort of came on that in my 20s, every teenager who was on there had a literal thing of, you have this many friends.
Yeah,
there is a
that's right,
physical
yeah.
number.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the popular kid in school has got 12,000. You have 8. And people can look that up and see that, and it's brutal. And I feel like it's about celebrating the things to celebrate. And for me, that's community and alcohol within a certain amount. Like alcohol is so much of a part of the culture, but it is celebrating this kind of like 2-pint culture, not like 20 pints and then having to go to hospital and then becoming an alcoholic when you're like 30. So it's celebrating the good things, but it's also acknowledging the bad things. It's kind of, and there's obvious things about colonialism, but one of the things I'm really sort of waking up to is just how I spent my 30s just really enjoying BBC4 documentaries and really enjoying British history. And then after a while realized that I was just being fed like a very flattering kind of quite narrow view. And there's a lot about the rest of the world I know nothing about. And so it's dealing with these things that I think is like how you create a space that's going to be welcoming going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we haven't really talked much about a kind of political dimension, but you know, I've always been a lefty, so you know, and there is a kind of given sense that the folk movement is full of, you know, woke lefty kind of lovely people.
I was going to say, I know one Tory councillor who's like a hardcore folky. He is like the only one. And he will often on his Facebook page say, I met that nice like Jacob Rees-Mogg, and then there will just be this shitstorm of whatever. And he's like, why can people not be reasonable? I'm like, use your fucking head, pal. What do you think? Like, look at your friendship group. Come on.
The thing about the importance of having somewhere that welcomes you, you know, a venue, a pub or something, you know, is critical, isn't it? So up in Beverley in Yorkshire, I went to the only session folk club I've ever been to held in a conservative club.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. You know, you sort of think if you tried to do that down our way, none of our mates would go. You know, I mean, just because of what it says on the door.
What was it like? What was the vibe? It was
fantastic. The people couldn't be more friendly. You know, they couldn't be more welcoming. Yeah. I mean, it was truly weird. And of course, one of the things that I wanted to write up, because you know, it's a story against myself, isn't it? And the terrible prejudice you have about. But the idea, the association was the weird thing in my head. The room was full of people that looked like you and me, and were singing songs that were all about, you know, bash the employers and stuff the establishment in a conservative club.
So the ISIS pub, the landlords are conservative voters. They're lovely people, but I mean, like, I have never met a pub landlord that isn't a conservative voter, probably except Joe Ryan. But I mean, they'll be singing along with, like, I mean, I try and like nominally keep it as a not political space, but Solidarity Forever will come out and everyone, and they'll be singing along with it as well. So it is this kind of curious thing. But a lot of the songs, like a lot of the musical songs, it's a very sort of fox hunting, like we don't want to fight, but by jingo if we do, all that sort of like slightly Kipling-y stuff. It's also part of it. It's a funny kind of thing. So started going on the folk scene in about 2006, 2007, and I noticed it growing and growing and growing. What really shifted that was Brexit. And I noticed it sort of fell off a cliff. And even and I'm sort of following various of the kind of folk musicians who are like, I don't know how to relate to Englishness as a result of this. And that's been one of the things that, I mean, so we were kind of trying to find ways of dealing with this in the session. We were sort of saying, well, we want to actually have more people singing in other languages. We want to still very much be English, be interested in an English identity, but broaden what it is and make it more inclusive. But it was this case of just, it was kind of had this toxicity to it. And then a Scottish postman sings a shanty, and then suddenly, like in a moment, the whole thing kind of flips and everyone's just like, oh, sea shanties. And it's shanties rather than English folk music that's big, that's right, but a lot of them are English songs, and suddenly this thing kind of picks up again. So I think it's the case of people recognize that it's community music, what you call this thing that we do.
Yeah.
Like for years, I was like, I'm not sure whether or not I'd really call myself folk. I'm not sure if it's more traditional or is it even more historical. And now I'm just like, is folk.
I said I've been recording this, James. I hope that's cool because I'll transcribe
That's fine.
The fruity bits. Yeah, is that okay?
That's fine. Did I slag off the government? I can't remember. Probably.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
But anyway, right, okay. I'm going to scoot. Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks, mate.
I'll catch you later.
Bye.
Thanks to James Bell for that fascinating romp through how to run a fairly unusual session. You know, James has got a particularly radical approach, which I happen to love. I think it's fantastic. What we're going to do in this series, though, is really get a look at all the different types of sessions and sing-arounds there are, from very traditional through to the kind of eclectic and madcap that's typified by James and quite a few of the others around the country, actually. So in this series, you know, we're going to look at all sorts of variations on what's happening in pubs and community centres near you. And if you want to have your session featured, then get in contact. The website addresses are on the screen that's going to come next. And yeah, see you next time.